Hey, everybody in YouTube land. This is Alex Manassa from Men Are Speaking, and I am happy to talk with you again today. Today is a subject that's near and dear to my heart. Okay. This is Christianity we're going to talk about and how I see things have gotten on the wrong path in the West and how our kind of my family's remote um, location and total isolation from the rest of Christianity actually allowed us to have a more pure version of it. I feel like less is more, and pulling the scales back from someone's eyes is a subtractive process, and through that subtractive process you can actually gain much greater insight. So hopefully my insight today will be helpful for you. My goal is that you'll be able to see what we see, and it will remove a lot of the cruft and a lot of the gunk and bad habits. I think a lot of Christians in the West are missing the mark, which is, if Jordan Peterson is to be believed, comes from the word sin comes from the word hamartia, which is a Greek word which means miss the mark. So you're literally sinning when you miss the point, right? I see a lot of Christians have a lot of issues, and the thing is, Christianity was once powerful. It was once a massive force in the world, and now it's kind of taken a back seat and is sitting back and doesn't know what to do. It is paralyzed. It's apoplectic. A lot of Christians are, I don't know, almost feels like they're wanting the end times. They want the rapture and all that. And I'm like, no, this ain't over till it's over. Okay. Like, our Father in heaven decides when this is over. We got to follow orders and still do what we're supposed to do. And a lot of things in the West for Christianity aren't working. And you'll see in my thesis statement here is I don't think the salt tastes salty here in the West. And when Jesus said, if you taste the salt and it doesn't taste salty, throw it to the ground and step on it. The only way you have salt that doesn't taste salty is if it's counterfeit. Okay, so I don't want you guys to be a counterfeit. I used to be a counterfeit too. Like, believe you me, I had a lot of these problems. And by stepping back and getting closer to my roots, closer to my family, and closer to my God through Scripture, I was able to realize I had been on the wrong path. I want to share that with you today. Okay? All right, ready? I'm going to try to operate OBS Studio. Oh, I'm back in the rice fields. I was born in them. Okay, how Christianity reigned and how to get back on the right path. Okay? What am I going to talk about today? I want to talk about my family story. I'm going to brush over what the West gets wrong. That deserves its own video. I also don't want to be too negative. I mean, you got to be negative to provide some corrective action. I understand that, but I mean, you got to space it out. Okay, you can't give too much sugar and you can't give too much medicine all in the same spoon. That's a big spoon to take. Okay, now we're going to talk about Christian development, because personal development of a Christian is something that I don't think is focused on as much as it should. I want to take you through some separate stages. Okay, so grab your glass of whiskey and join me. We're going to talk about how Christianity can thrive, how Christians can lead, and the strategy of Christians. All right, so let's get into it. My family story. My family story is a little bit murky because we didn't even have last names until the Dutch arrived. So the Dutch brought literacy. The Dutch colonists in Indonesia. They brought, of course, Christianity. They pretty much ordered us to get last names because try to organize an island or an archipelago full of people who just don't have last names. Like, that's John, that's Jim, that's Bob, and that's all we know. Anyway, Indonesia is predominantly Muslim and has been for a long time, a very long time. I don't know the history of the caliphate or whatever in whatever you want to call it in Indonesia, but it's basically a caliphate. It's very close to one. And that means that Christianity is on hard mode there. So we are constantly buffeted with the fires of adversity, and we have to turn to God all the time, and we have to stay pure, or else those fires are going to burn us. In other words, to put it like kind of crassly, if you're a Christian and a jerk, you don't get to live very long. You have to be a Christian and through Scripture develop yourself to be the kind of person who is above that level of sacrifice and suffering, right? Like, people will not want to touch you, and I'll touch on that in a bit. But we gained a reputation for for being very hardworking and being honest above all. So Indonesia is not a very high trust country. So if you're honest, as you would be as a Christian through Scripture, you kind of develop the reputation of being someone that people can go to for help, go to for advice, go to for loans, go to for, and we don't put our own spin on it. We don't try to take advantage of someone who's coming to us for help. It's very rare, actually. If you're in the West, you take for granted, and that's the biggest thing about the West, is they have a great civilization, but they take for granted the foundational notions that keep it great, right? That reputation for hard work, honesty, and love, like you try going to the Soviet Union and seeing examples of that, it just doesn't happen, right? It took a great organizing structure, moral organizing structure to create the West, but now the West doesn't understand how that structure really comes into play. Like, where does it come from? They just take it for granted that it's there, and they're baffled by the current world when the sort of the abyss of the developing world, the third world, whatever you want to call it, looks them in the eye and just lies to them, and they just don't understand it, right? Of course, being this nexus of honesty meant that we gained wealth. We also lost a lot of wealth. Like we got as much as we lost, and we always stayed the same. So we didn't follow these cycles of like the fourth turning or anything like that. We always kept the grind going. We kept it slow and steady. It's a walk with Christ, not a run or a sprint. It's a walk. So we continue to grow as the troubles of the world do not bother us. My grandfather is right here. Can I put like a laser pointer on? Figure out how to do that. Oh, I don't know how to do that. Oh no, I'm just gonna use this ugly little cursor here. You got to just watch the screen. The man on the left is my grandfather, Christian Manasseh, which, by the way, if you're in Indonesia and you're a Muslim, or sorry, and it's a predominantly Muslim nation and your parents name you Christian, that's like the boy named Sue. If you ever heard that Johnny Cash song, he was on hard mode. And there's Oma, right? My grandma. She's lovely. They grew up poor, and they grew up during the Japanese invasion. I remember my dad telling me that my grandfather's middle school was blown up. We ended up doing business with the Japanese later. Total forgiveness. It's no problem. We're not going to hold a grudge. The very, very early history here was the Dutch arriving, as I've said before. Convert us to Christianity, order us to have last names. You got it. We kept the books. We were, through Christianity, we became very honest, very forgiving, very good, and very reliable thereby. Like having a good work ethic and being high trust is an anomaly in human history. That does not normally happen, okay? But that's the miracle of Christianity. The Japanese chased them off, the Dutch away, right? They ran off, tail between their legs, I suppose, during World War II. And after World War II, of course, the Americans ran the Japanese away. Japanese had a really rough go of it, and they gave it rough too, so such is the pendulum of life. The Japanese came back in the 1960s with a business proposal, and my grandfather was in a good position to help them with their business proposal. They wanted to open up a car company. The company is Toyota. And they needed paperwork. My grandfather had worked in the government, but he had left because it was so corrupt, went and lived in a hut in Sumatra. That's where my dad comes into the story, because he was a little boy then. My dad tells me about the time where he was living in a hut in Sumatra. The Japanese came. My grandfather saw an opportunity to like bring the Japanese, get the Japanese their licenses and everything, and streamline the process, because my grandfather was aware of the process. And my grandfather, in turn, was from working with the Japanese, was given a job at the bottom of the plant, and he worked his way up to the top until eventually he ran the entire operation of Toyota in Indonesia, and he answered only to the Japanese. That is a very high honor. So you've got so you have Christianity allowing my family to interface with multiple cultures: the Dutch, the Japanese, the Americans, and other Indonesians who are Muslim, right? Not normally people that work together, but we're able to be that linchpin of civilization that can make things happen and bring people together. Again, I got to ask you to contrast this with the current Christianity we see in the West, where it feels like there's a lot of wedge. There's not a lot of love, there's a lot of standoffishness, us and them. I don't like it. We're gonna talk a little about that here. Oh, here's a recent history, just because I love my dad, and I love it when people show generations of families, just the progression, right? So there's my grandpa, there's my dad on the right there, and then there's me. I'm just kidding. My dad came to America after college. Well, no, I think he had some college. I don't know. I never asked him, but he went to Texas, which is, if you want to become an American, go to Texas. That's where you start. That's where you really jump into it to become an American. And then he went to California back when it was cool, back when I think Reagan was the president. Sorry, California, you guys are a hot mess right now. Don't worry, I love you anyway. My dad became an accountant, flew over to Maryland, the East Coast, worked for the IRS, and had me, and I became an engineer. So all's well, right? Uh, all right, so where the West went wrong, I decided to hide a bunch of slides. Sorry about the noises there. I decided to hide a bunch of slides because it wasn't nice. I will, which needs to be said. Like, I need to not be nice to you, but I also have another point in this slideshow. I'm not here to just dunk on Christians, although that is one of my favorite hobbies, dunk on Western Christians. In short, though, I feel that we've really been held back probably since Constantine, because Christianity became an institution in and of itself, and it lost a lot of the intimacy, the interpersonality, the fact that everyone was building this house. It just became like there's the clergy and they keep the house going and we just show up. That's probably the heart of what we have wrong with Christianity now, is that we have a lot of Christians that just show up, and you have a lot of Christians that go way overboard too. So we'll talk about that. I'm not going to go through this slide because this would be like half an hour just on its own. So feel free to pause the video. And I have on the left some Getty Images stock photo of a lady screaming in some guy's ear. I am sure you've had an interaction. Any Christian is anybody really who's ever interacted with Christianity at a lot has probably met a Christian who's like this, and they are frankly a disgrace to the faith. I hate it. This is not how you change hearts. Here's a man who does change hearts. Mr. Rogers, who is just an oasis of calm, tranquility, justice, truth. I mean, he is basically Captain America, as far as I'm concerned. He's an amazing guy, and that's what all Christians should be. You should be an oasis, not standing on moral authoritarianism and barking at people, calling them heretics, and all this, like, and then standing upon authority, which is the worst thing to stand upon to be a Christian. Like, you need worldly authority to reach people and to reach God. Like, you need, basically what you're saying is that I need things in this world to feel transcendent and to be transcended. It's like, you were given a great gift and a great sacrifice, and yet people still continue to sacrifice. People still continue to feel like they have to mount their own cross despite what God may or may not have actually commanded them to do. Which, if you start making your own path as a Christian and you don't rely on God to tell you what that path is, you're kind of like committing a soft form of blasphemy where you're just hijacking the word of God and doing what you think you should do, which is the absolute wrong thing to do. That's why you get a lot of Christians who just start acting out of pocket and just being a real disgrace. We've all met these people. Every Christian has seen other Christians who've gone too far. Oh no, my little face is covering Mr. Rogers. Oh no. There we go, it's better. There goes Mr. Rogers. I'm sorry about that. I'm new. All right. But in short, though, bad Christianity is impersonal and out of touch. Like, you can't reach people, and you don't really regularly reach people. If there's one thing that a Christian is supposed to do, it's to reach people, and not just your insular group of Christians. Okay, you're supposed to be out there in the world, pulling people out of the world. Okay. So, all right. So, types of Western Christian. There we go. What I see mostly is that there's deferential Christians who say, well, my church is doing this mission and I just threw some money in the bucket and I'm good then. Okay. Once they sort of rest on their laurels, they show up every Sunday like that means something, because on its own, that doesn't at all. And then, of course, you got your second type of Christians that I see in the West, which are the burnouters. These are the guys that volunteer for everything. They learn everything. They just take it all in. They're very much just relying on their own willpower. They're very much setting their own pace. These are the ones who don't walk with Christ. They are running with Christ, and they run past Christ, and they're on their own path, which is about as bad as the deferential Christians. Typically, the burnouters, as I've named them to be, burn themselves out. And I've seen a lot of very cynical and maybe even atheistic people who've gone down this path, and it's not a way to go. So I want to talk about the sort of effect that these people have. That basically, not to like belabor the point, but they kind of make a disgrace out of it. Like, you've seen people who have criticized Christianity, and there's two types of people they criticize. It's the ones who are hypocritical and just sort of show up, throw money in the bucket, and call themselves good. They do the rituals. Is their heart in it? Well, they don't do anything outside of the church, or they do anything on their own. They don't really know how to talk to people. They have stunted in their development, and they're completely reliant on their church for any sort of godliness. Okay, and we saw during COVID, a lot of churches shut down, and you saw a lot of people just drift away because they were using that. Like the church should be resting on the strength of the members, not the members resting on the strength of the church, if that makes any sense. And of course, the burnouters are just objectionable, right? The second type of people that are second type of Christians that are usually criticized are the ones who are way overzealous and go overboard, and they'll go around calling you names and just being very unchristlike and very unchristian in the pursuit of Christianity, which is pretty funny. It's like pursuing war in the goal of having peace. Like it's like you're pursuing war. You shouldn't pursue war. It's like a resort. You don't. Sometimes you have to say something mean to somebody, but you shouldn't be pursuing that. You shouldn't be like, I'm going to go out of my way to call people names. Like, Catholics will call Protestants prots, and everyone will call Catholics some very unkind things. It just seems very silly. All right, so let's talk about actual development. Okay, so this is for you. This is a little PSA on how do you develop as a Christian, from my opinion. Okay, so for what I've seen that works is, I've seen it not work a lot. And if you start skipping steps, it becomes pretty dangerous. And underdeveloped Christians are prone to be overzealous, lose touch with people, burn out, have brittle faith. So, they're one question away from completely falling apart. They poorly represent the faith by not really understanding what they're doing, going out there and speaking with authority when they don't have any. I see that a lot. I'm guilty of that too. I'm guilty of all these things, by the way. So I'm not standing here like I'm better than everybody else. Like I learned these the hard way. So if it sounds like I have any authority here, that's the authority of my mistakes, right? So I don't want you to repeat those mistakes. If you're currently making those mistakes, I want you to stop, because life is so much better when you develop properly. So, and of course, pride is one of the biggest faults of Western Christianity. They love their pride. They're super proud. If you ever feel like you have to feel bad about someone else, like you have to feel negative about somebody else, and that makes you feel good, that is a number one cause. That's a number one sign that you fall into pride. Okay, don't do that. That's not good. All right, so the stages of development is you first have to be humbled. This is a life-crushing event where you realize that you're powerless. You're not the driver in your life. Let me move my little head over there. You are not the driver in your life. You are out of control. I'm humiliated. I had this happen to me recently. I have this happen to me every once in a while, where I look in the mirror and I'm like, man, I do not like who I am. Why did I get here? How did I do this? And rather than, you got two choices there. You can either try to adjust your own behaviors and still be the master of your world, or you can submit to God and become a Christian. You're right. You can submit and actually begin the humiliating but righteous path to becoming a good Christian. And it's all inside. It's not about the world. You don't have to change the world. You don't have to change anybody else, just yourself. You are really only called to do things that you're capable of. And you're only capable of changing yourself. You can't change anyone else, let alone the world. All right, reconciliation. This happens after the humiliation, right? Reconciliation is when you sort of make peace with your shortfalls, your humanity. You begin forgiving yourself. You begin understanding yourself. And this is why when I talk about Christians who sort of are a disgrace to the faith, I'm not really angry at them or anything. Like, you've noticed that I've said, I used to do these things too. I feel bad about them, and I want people to get better and stop doing those things. That's because I've reconciled with I hope, I mean, it's a lifelong process, but I've reconciled with a lot of my faults, and I've given the burden up to God, and I ask for forgiveness, and I just try harder. And that's the only thing you really can do. And once you realize that you're kind of just another person in this big gym of the church. You're there trying to lose weight, and you see someone who's fatter. If you're in the gym and you see someone who's fatter than you, and they're on the same treadmill, you feel great about them. You're like, wow, wonderful. You're working hard, but we don't do that as Christians. And I don't know why. We say like, that person's got faults, and nay on them. Well, that's comes from the assumption that we have infinite willpower, and we don't, right? We don't actually have that much control of ourselves. The control that we feel like we have is an illusion. We have to give over control to a set of moral principles that is above us. This is almost atheistic language. You don't have to believe in God to say that we need to have some sort of moral principle that is above us that we can adhere to and strive for, that doesn't also break us, right? That's actually kind of a miraculous thing, that you can have a moral system that doesn't break you. Because the entire Old Testament is the Israelites constantly being broken because their humanity is not capable of meeting the ideals that God has set. And that might have been for a reason, because you're supposed to go and ask for forgiveness, right? But eventually the pride of sets in and takes over, especially in the ruling religious class, where they do not want to admit faults, they don't want to admit mistakes, and they instead lord over their people and create new rules. And sounds familiar, right? Like lots of new rules. By the way, you realize there's not that many rules, but in Christianity, if you read the Bible and really pay attention to the New Testament, especially the Gospels of Jesus, he doesn't have a ton of rules. He does have rules though, and they are stringent. They are difficult, but they are the straightforward path. It's the rule of your heart. Stuff like even calling other Christians stupid is actually a damnable sin to Christ. I forget which scripture says that, but it's in there. I was surprised. I was like, that's something I do all the time. I need to stop. I need to stop right now. Oh my goodness. All right. This is the reconciliation stage, is a very long stage. This is where you start to reach some level of inner peace. You cannot jump the gun and go to the next stage. Enduring, right? Enduring is when you know the message. You are now just living a good Christian life. You're making it work. And after you've done this for a long time, God will choose a time for you to shine. And when you're shining is when people are paying attention to you. They're looking to you. A lot of Christians try to go from humiliation to shining immediately, and they have not reconciled the faults within themselves, right? The different faults, the different sins, as I sip some whiskey, that they have, they can't reconcile it. So they're given into pride and shame and everything. And when they're leading people, they start committing horrible sins, and it goes out of control because they can't contend with it. They don't know how to reconcile themselves. It's pretty tragic. So how does Christianity thrive? Well, the main tool set for Christianity, so this is the brass tacks. This is if you're in a third world country and you're surrounded by enemies and you got to keep your Christianity on the down low, but you want to use Christianity to enrich your life and enrich everyone else around you and spread the good word and create the good city and the great world. These are the 4 tool sets you need to use, okay? Humanization. So you're piercing through the barriers that we have between ourselves and others, okay? Let's say there's a Just Stop Oil protester that's glued themselves to the road. I've seen Western conservatives and Western Christians who are supposed to be morally upstanding say like, oh, we should just chop their hands off or run them over or beat them up. I was like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? Here's what I would do. I would go up to one of those protesters who's glued themselves to the road and says, hey, mister, got yourself in a bit of a pickle, huh? Try to make a joke, right? And he's like, yeah. Well, you came out here to reach people, and I got to say you've reached me. I mean, this is unusual, and I'm kind of fascinated. I'm interested in what you have to say. You want to grab a cup of coffee or something? And you go to have some coffee with this guy, and he may or may not have like a chunk of asphalt on his hand, which is hilarious. I would definitely make jokes about that. Just piercing through the barrier. And for 2 hours, I'd sit there and let him or her just say whatever they wanted. And I would not interrupt. I would not disagree. I would just listen and be like, oh yeah. Yeah, I never thought of it that way. That's interesting. And just act like they're an old friend or an old relative that you've not seen in a long time. And you're like kind of bemused at the situation that they're in. Like, it's okay to be bemused. It's kind of weird gluing yourself to the road, but let's talk about it. That's a wild story. How'd you get here? Tell me about yourself. And I guarantee you that after about a week or 2 of doing that, they'll probably be completely de-radicalized. Why does the West not do this? You'd have your problems solved in lickety-split no time, but instead you act with aggression and it stokes division. Like, what are we supposed to do? What are Christians supposed to be? I'm going to go back to the quote of, if the salt doesn't taste salty, throw it away and stick it underfoot. Who's here really at fault here? Like we have a whole Western hemisphere full of Christians, and they cannot manage to take a crazy person out for coffee and just make them feel like a normal human being for a minute and make them feel like, yeah, maybe there's more to life than gluing myself to stuff and throwing paint at paintings or soup or whatever is it, throw an entire stir. If those are Asian protesters, they'd have like a walk. I'd just have a whole walk and I'd throw that right at the painting. Crazy guy at the Louvre through a bunch of stir-fried leeks and some noodles. Uncle Roger does not approve. Oh, waste of stir-fry. Just go leak. He doesn't care about the painting at all. Oh, it's funny. like humor is a great way of humanizing things. Like how many Christians are funny? How many Christians are out there making jokes that people laugh at, like making light of a situation? You know, boy, we found ourselves in a pickle this time, eh? Oh, it's just a missed opportunity. And I've got to say, like, I get a feeling that God's not happy with the West, the Western Christians. And God has sent hordes of I say derogatorily, he sent hordes of barbarians to his chosen people before. I mean, the Old Testament, the Babylonians were like his chosen for a second until he found them also repulsive. But he was like, yeah, I'm choosing these people to destroy all you Israelites because you guys suck and you're not doing what you're supposed to do. I'm like, Western Christians is the same thing. I don't know. Echoes of the past. Like you got a horde of people who are of a different religion. Have you guys tried to convert them? It seems like a Christian thing. It seems like a Christian thing to try. I don't know. Did you try that? Did you try doing the one thing that you're supposed to? Anyways, sorry, I'm going on. All right. So now you've humanized this person. I've taken this young person out to coffee for like a couple of weeks. We're having a great time. I'm learning a lot about coffee from them because they're a barista, of course. What do we do next, right? Well, differentiation. All right, we need to set ourselves apart. I say to the person, let's say their name is what's the lady's name? I don't know, Becca. Oh man, I'm just revealed which generation I'm from. Yeah, I'm from the Becca generation. Anyways, I say, Becca, I feel like the world just isn't for us sometimes. I wonder if we should be doing something else or if we were made for more than this. There's a great song from when I was young. Again, I'm going to date myself here. We were, I think it was Lifehouse or something. We were meant to live for something more. We lost ourselves. That's super true. We were meant to live for something more. Like, let's set ourselves apart. Me and Becca, it's you and me against the world. I'm tired of this 9-to-5 lifestyle. I'm tired of scrimping and saving so I can live in some dingy crap hole where people don't know each other. Like, I want to know people. I want to be part of a tribe. I want to be part of a people. Let's go. Let's start. Tribe of 2. Let's go right now. That's pretty powerful, isn't it? If someone who with a ton of student loan debts just drifting through life lost, like I don't think we're at we don't have a lack of people who are lost in life right now. Like, why are we not pairing up with them and getting them out of here and say, let's go, let's get out of this world. This sucks. Let's go found a small fishing community like in Florida or something. I don't know. Or make a little farm in Tennessee. All right. So we've set ourselves apart, you and me, Becca, against the world. Got it. Then I bring Becca into my world in what's called hospitalization. So hospital, I think it comes from the word hospitalite or something like hospitalite. Basically means having someone over as a guest, right? The Knights Hospitaller come to mind, right? They'd have people, pilgrims who are on the way to the Holy Land. They would allow the pilgrims in to their castles, into their houses to be guests so they can sort of recharge their batteries, get their feet washed, all the good stuff on their way back to the Holy Land, right? Easy peasy. What you're trying to do here is you're trying to show them your world. So now you said we need to get out of the world. Now you're saying, well, here's another world we could go into. And then finally incorporation, where they become a part of your inner circle of fellowship. They don't have to actually convert to be a Christian. A lot of them will stay true to their whatever faith. They might be an atheist. Like, it's up to them whether they convert. It's not up to you. But it is up to you whether or not you be a friend to them. Okay? It is up to you whether or not you are there to be a friend to them. Is that what's more Christian than that? To really care about somebody. I think the world could use a lot more of that, and the West could be saved if we did that. But I'll tell you what, it would reduce the division, and it would help you lead, okay? So how do Christians lead? Okay, Christian leadership comes in a couple of different flavors. First off is the investor, the power of his people. I have a good amount. I've been blessed with tremendous fortune. I'm doing very well. Life is good for now, knock on wood. If that changes, then God's will be done. We'll see what's next. The investor is the power to their people. With my money, I could build almost a trailer park and just have nothing but good. I could have it like laser focused. Like, you have to apply for membership and you have to be a college educated, trying to get your life together, trying to pay off your student loans, trying to get out of the apartment cycle, out of the debt cycle. I just need a place. Basically, this is what your parents should have done, or what their parents should have done. Give them a place where they can just live in peace and grind out until they're at like zero, like until they're at like net zero. Okay. And that way when they're working, they're no longer working to pay off their debts. They're working to build a better life for themselves. That's the problem, is people work for their debts. They don't work for themselves. Like when they go and get that paycheck, it goes right out the door. And you could criticize people for taking the little pleasures of life. Your avocado toast was always the millennial example, but what else do you have to keep you going if you're working for your debt? I'm very sympathetic to this. I was working for my debt for a long time. That stopped after I did a Herculean effort. Maybe I'll talk about it sometime of how I got my debts gone. That was a trip, man. That was a trip. Talk about this Asian stereotype of like living in a tiny box to save money so I can pay off my debts. It was nuts. That brings me next to the shepherd, right? So the investor is there trying to bring prosperity to his people. The shepherd is there to watch over his people. He's taking care of you. He's the one who calls you and says, "Hey, how are you doing? You've been doing well? Are you okay?" Like, how many people go to a Western church and have members of the church call you and just see how you're doing? Like, that doesn't happen. Hardly ever happens. Everyone just kind of goes back to their siloed little lifestyles. Like they're sort of suburban nuclear family lifestyles, and no one really talks to each other. It's very weird. Anyways, the mentor is the uplifter of his people. What that means is this person shows you how to be. A mentor shows you how to be, and whatever comes after the word be is up to you and the mentor, right? So your mentor might be like, I've got a mentor right now who's on YouTube. I love him. I forget his name. He does carpentry. I love carpentry. I love making stuff out of wood. My wife loves to see it. I make it nice and smooth and pretty. Got a router table and all that stuff. I really love it. And this guy is like a mentor to me, right? Why aren't Christians being mentors to each other and to other people? Showing people how to uplift themselves, right? A mentor shows you how to be, and the Christians should have a monopoly on being, because we're able to reach that level of peace because we've reconciled. Now, there's the problem is a lot of Christians have not reconciled with themselves, and they do not know how to be. But I think maybe we'll turn a corner. Who knows? Maybe this YouTube video will help. I'd hope. The brother. So you're there to be a comfort to your people, as the scripture has written, that when others mourn, you should mourn. When others laugh, you should laugh. Don't get too confused. That doesn't go over well. Yeah. You're supposed to be there among people. Like, you're not supposed to always be helping everyone. Sometimes you just be there to be with them, to show some companionship. And people need all these things. People need some investment right now. People need a little bit of watching over, right? People need to learn how to be, and people need some solidarity and some comfort, right? So where are the Christians? Where are you guys? I don't see where you guys are. I had to go all the way to the Appalachian Mountains to find the Christians. The salt doesn't taste salty, but here's some Christian strategies right now. So this is how you actually change your life, work your life to open up doors, okay? So new options open up as you carry the Spirit. None require intention. This stuff kind of happens automatically, which is why a lot of Christians will say, well, God has brought me here. Because kind of literally he has. We don't try to do stuff. Opportunities just sort of show up. And if you're living the right life, there is no shortage of fertile soil for you to plant the seed of the Spirit, if you're just there showing up as the gardener. All right. And to speak politically, you will be unintentionally subversive by doing all these things. You are a master of de-radicalization. You become a master of connecting people. You become a master of companionship and helping others. You start to, as you master yourself and reconcile yourself, you begin to become able to help others reconcile themselves, right? You become this font of this good spirit and this peace, and the fact that we need God, from the humiliation step, right? You need God to be right and to work properly, right? And conversion is not about changing people's religion, really. You're just trying to change hearts. So if you can make a nice, happy, better life for everyone, that's great. That is a byproduct of living the right lifestyle, and that's God's will. Yeah, God is good, right? He could choose not to be good if he didn't want to, but he wants us to live. He loves us, so he wants to live happy lives, and he gives us the tools to do it. But if we defy that, not so happy, right? He might be working for the other guy. All right, so let's take a look at some archetypes and how they feed into making the world a better place, and also making your life better, actually. So let's hit it. The trusted counsel. As I said before, my family was this arbiter kind of between Muslim Indonesians, the Dutch, the Japanese, the Americans. Like, even in Singapore, my family's active, like very active there. I don't even know what they do over there. And we're the sort of trusted ones. Like trusted counsel, you might be the trusted counsel to like a crime lord or something, right? This does not necessarily mean that you are a lawyer or something like that. What this means is that you are a oasis of truth and light. You are a source of honesty in someone's life where otherwise there is none, right? I once had a college roommate who told me that, hey, Alex, I just realized that you're like the only person in my life I really trust. You know, I don't have any designs for him. I just listen. And I was like, that's really amazing, man. That's really cool. And I was like really touched by that. And it turns out this guy was the grandson of an Iranian general. I was like, I just bass awkwardly walked my way into like being a trusted counsel for the grandson of an Iranian general. I hope that the fellow's doing really well. I lost contact after I left that college to go to the Daytona Beach campus. I hope he's doing well. I should try to look him up. Anyways, in a world of deception, you embrace others with honesty. You're willing to give honesty. Sometimes it's harsh. Sometimes the honesty is good. So, you know when someone needs a pep talk, but the idea is that you are now working for someone else's well-being, for their best interests, honestly working for their best interests. We take that for granted in the West, but in a lot of the world, that is super rare, and there's always a catch. So people will look at you with some suspicion, but time of service, like the more you serve, the more they'll begin to trust you. And it's very satisfying to help someone grow, and no matter what it might be, right? You get a lot of power by doing this, by the way, like a tremendous amount of power. And Christians shouldn't shirk power. We shouldn't run from power. You should endeavor and have faith that it can be managed honestly if you stay honest with God. Because what you're supposed to do is give the power over to God. You can replace the word God with the objective truth of the universe, reality, right? Of some sort of moral code that is immaterial and non-malleable, right? It is an eternal constant. You call it whatever you want, but you are there to work for it, and you have to have faith, right? That's why you're so good as a trusted counsel, because you can just put tons of power in your hands, and you're really worrying about what does God want me to do with it, rather than, I could use this to get a nice house. All right, next one is the prodigal son. I talked about connection. This character, this archetype is important for gaining connections, and this is one of my favorite ones to interact with because they always have the best stories. They've lived, and they're always beset with temptation because of their past life. They've like really lived a life. They're very interesting people, and they're kind of an amplification of our own humanity. Like someone who's given into vices, violence, drugs, sex, all that stuff. These guys have lived humanity to its fullest in the worst possible way, but they've turned away from that. So rather than seek the next high, they seek God, they seek peace, they seek to be part of something greater. And I like hanging out with them because they remind me of myself, and they give me strength. And because they're fighting off demons that are far more powerful than the ones I'm fighting. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. This guy's really giving himself over. And it's inspiring. He's able to reach people that no one else can because he still speaks the language. Like he hates that he hates that he's part of this world. But he knows he's not of this world. He hates that he's on this world and things affect him so much. And that helps him relate to others, because the way that the world affects us, the temptations and everything, that's kind of most of our interaction with this world is temptation. It's kind of sucks, right? It's almost as if this world is some sort of punishment. Anyways, he's able to reach people because he's experienced that, but he's walked away from it. So he knows the path back. He knows the way out of the brambles and back onto the good path to God. So this guy's great. I love hanging out with you guys. They also have the best stories. Anyways, the hometown hero, a simple salt of the earth guy. When I say salt of the earth, he tastes salty. So he carries the town on his back joyfully. You bring comfort and care to your people, and you're like an earthly father. You're a reflection of the heavenly Father. I should have capitalized that F in father. Whoopsie. Just pretend that's capitalized. I'll blame the font. You are a shepherd and a lamb. You are both a leader and the led. You are there to take care of people. You're a good shepherd. You bring stability and a steady burning everlasting light into this world. You might have a job that's as simple as like, I'm a plumber, or I'm a teacher, like the person in this photo here, doing a simple job, but you're just this pillar of the community that keeps the world good. You were one of the many lights in this world. All right, blessed wife or husband. Peter, I think, First Peter chapter 4 has a lot to say about this, but the essence of it is that you're there to remind, as Proverbs said, that a good wife is a blessing from God. You're kind of there to be a reflection of heavenly blessings on earth to your spouse. Now, I know that there's so many ways. Count the ways in which the West has fallen short. But I see like the divorce rate among Christians, and I'm like, what on earth is happening? Like if my wife left me, I would just be like, well, I'm done. I'm not remarrying. Like, because to remarry would be to commit adultery every time, It's a lie. I made one oath, I have one God, I have one wife. That's it. Right? And I know there's circumstances that come up, but that's the law. The law is the law. We don't get to say but. The law is the law, right? And you're supposed to stay with each other, and it's long suffering, which is a way of saying patience. But when this is done properly by proper Christians, you are bonded and anchored to a heavenly kingdom, but you're still living your life on earth. But you're helping each other out. It's not 50, like the work is not 50-50. It's 100-100. It's 100-100. Both of you are putting all of it in and working hard and helping build the kingdom. And by this way, from like the Peter chapter 4, you will kind of bring your partner closer to God by being that reminder, right? You have a holy obligation to be a good spouse, to look after your husband, to look after your wife, okay? Because you are her anchor, his or her anchor to God. And if you fall in that duty, that's like a priest, defaming their position, right? Or a pastor defaming their position. Like how many, like that's the sheep that you're trying to shepherd, right? That's your one and only. Okay. And God created women not to have children because women were created in the garden. There was no having children there, as far as I know. God created woman explicitly to complete the man. So if you're not like, she's not there to be a baby factory, she's not there to serve you, okay? She's there to complete you. So do as God intended and use her as the springboard to complete yourself and to be one with them, one with her, right? You're going to stand as a loving testimony to the devotion to God by being devoted to each other. I don't see this a lot in the West, but when I do see it, it's a beautiful thing. All right, so summary. Okay. Pretty much love is the wedge. Proper Christian love, and the reconciliation of yourself. Like reconciliation is a part of self-love, right? Loving yourself is trying to take God up on his offer to take your burdens upon him. If you will just surrender your will to God, right? You become much lighter and you're able to get away from grudges, anger, pride. You're not driven by these earthly motivations. These things divide people, right? And they divide both from each other and from God. But by being that trustworthy glue, that linchpin, like I was mentioning, you can bring people together and you can wedge in and like get a foothold to remove that shell or help them remove the shell from themselves and become healed. Soften their heart, earn their trust, earn their counsel, and befriend them and create a village, right? Create a people, a culture, a tribe, whatever you want to call it, right? And finally, the greatest power of all, the one that binds civilizations together, that brings tribes together, is people's faith and hope. That by being bonded to another, whether it's neighbor, brother, spouse, father, child, that we all are bonded through hope. You're supposed to be the living conduit of that hope in this world, and that hope is supposed to be given, like signaled by humanizing others. Okay? So the real summary here is that you guys need to start tasting salty or else you're going to be doomed. My family has, my father has taken in people from the inner city Baltimore to live with us in suburban Anne Arundel County. They had much better schools. They had much better water. Like the water was better. Everything was better. And it was all because my dad took them in. And we just treated them like brothers when they lived there, right? That's normal. It was not treated like some big thing. He never bragged about it. He never talked about it. It was just another thing that we did. We saw an opportunity to help somebody, and we did so. You'll be successful both in life and business and relationships if you do these things. Look out for other people. Humanize other people. Humanize yourself to them as well, and really kind of wedge in there and invade their world a little bit and make it better. Like, go in there and impose yourself a little bit just at the start and say, like, hey, my name's Alex, what's yours? You know, that sort of thing. And build that relationship, because that's what these individual relationships are, what Western society was built on, as far as I can tell. Like, it's not just the family. Because families have to choose to put aside grudges amongst each other. Families have to choose to work together and form a village. Families have to choose, like, these families all had, in the West, have different last names based on their profession. And the only way you can do that is if this family, the Tanner family, could just worry about tanning because they had a good relationship with the Green family, who was the Green Thumb or the grocer. I don't know the word for grocer, the last name that corresponds to grocer is, but they were able to specialize and form a civilization, not because they all had families. Like, tribes have families. It was about the bonds between families, the bonds between people, the trust, the breaking down of grudges and feuds. That's what made Western civilization. So to even say that family is the backbone of it is, I mean, it's fundamentally correct, but it's not comprehensively correct. It omits that you're supposed to make allies and friends, really true, have fellowship with others. That's the real backbone of the kingdom. You could take people who are completely not family at all, and you can, through Christ, make a village and settle a place, right? So, yep, something to think about. Let me just here. There we go. It's been a pleasure. If you've watched this far, I appreciate it. You can do all the YouTube stuff down below if you like. I also appreciate that. I do read comments. I don't think I've gotten a lot of comments. If you want to comment, feel free. I hope this is interesting to you. If you want to develop yourself in Christ, put aside the world for a little bit and just read Matthew. And just forget everything you know about Christ and Christianity and just read Matthew by itself first, because that's the testament of Christ. You can read all four if you want, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and form an opinion. But I'd start there, because you're going to find out that what is on those pages does not reflect what you've been taught in the world. So get out the middleman, get the teachers out of the way. Okay. If there's one class of people you should learn to not trust anymore, it's teachers. Okay. Because in Matthew 22, I think it was Matthew 22. Is it 22 or 23? Verses 1 through 12. Christ explicitly says that you are to have no teachers on earth. I'm your teacher. Christ is your teacher. So go read Christ's word. Don't fall for any other teachers. Okay. And go edify yourself. It's a short read. You know, there's a really cool Joshua Graham, like AI book reading, audiobook style for Matthew. It's pretty good. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. All right. Until next time, guys, have a blessed one. Have a great one. Go and call someone you haven't called recently. Go drink a lot of water. Stretch every day. Eat your vegetables. I hope you guys have a good one, okay? Bye.